Okay, so what I'm about to do now is try to plot those data points in example 1, example 2, and example 3 together on this piece of graph paper right here so that you can kind of see the relationship. So now let's look back. I want you to once again flip back to your note page where you have example 1 on the correlation coefficient. Right? So now back in my example 1 right here. Okay, the data set, you have it on your notes, right? What I have found earlier. Now I hope you have that note page with you also. But then what I have found earlier is that the correlation coefficient in example 1, right? We found the correlation coefficient was it was a 0.86, right? So now with your data set in front of you, let's try to plot these things together. So what I see is that this direction here is for x, right? That direction here is for y. So what I'm seeing here, when x is 1, which is your first data point, right? When x is 1, y is 2. So this is where I put the point that is. It's 1 and 2. Okay? Now when x is 2, I got 1. Okay? So this is my second point data, right? Because your x component is 2 and your y value is 1, according to the data. Right? And then when I'm moving on to my third data point, my x value is 3 and my y value is also 3. So that's my point right there. Okay? And then as I'm moving further, moving into my fourth point, my fourth data point, now the x value is 4, but the y value is still 3. So I have the point right there. Okay? Moving on to my fifth data point, my x value here is a 6. Okay? But my y value here is only a 5. So I can see that it's right there. Okay? And then my last data point, which is x is being 7, and then the y value here is a 4. So I have a point right there. Alright, so now this is it. This is all the data points that we have. But see, once again, if you look at this together, you can see that all the points, even though the points here, they don't nicely straighten out into one perfect line. They don't straighten out into one perfect line. However, they form kind of like a bandwidth. They form kind of like a bandwidth that is going up altogether, right? That's the expectation. That was what I meant by going up to the right. As we go further to the right, all these points here seems to increase, seem to rise higher and higher, and that's why that is consistent with the fact that the correlation coefficient here is a number so close to 1. Okay, is that making sense now? All right. So now, if you applying the same concept here, I'm moving on to, let's use the grid space in this part right here, this grid space right here for example number 2. So now I want you to turn your focus to whatever the page that you have example number 2, and plot the points together, so that we can see what's going on here. Let's try to examine to see if the plotting is going to make it consistent with the R coefficient that we have found earlier. So now I have found that my R value in example 2 is a 0.898, right? And this one here is even closer to 1. The R value here, this one is even closer to 1. So now my expectation here is that the point is probably even going to climb up higher than the preceding example, right? So let's go ahead and start plotting here. My first data point, x is 1 and y is 5. So it's going to be right there, my first point. Okay, everybody agree? All right. And then my second data point here, x is 2 and y is 4. So I have a point right there. So it looks like it's dropping so far, right? It's dropping, but don't worry, let's just keep moving on. My third data point, the x is happening at 3, right? But then the y value is 8, so I'm going to count that there, so it's right there. So now all of a sudden I'm seeing a huge jump right there, okay? And then my fourth value, which is x is 4, and my y value is a 9 for that. So what I have is a point right here, okay? And once again, you can do this yourself too, right? So you can pause the video and do the plotting yourself too. And then when my x is 6, which is my last data point, my x is 6, and my y value is a 10. So this is where my last point is. So now this time, see, we have only 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 points, right? But we look at all the points together. So far, you can already notice that they look like really going up, right? They really are looking to go up right there. The band altogether is going really steep, a lot more steep compared to the first example, right? So once again, that makes it consistent with the fact that my R here is even closer to 1, right, compared to my first example. All right. So at least, I mean, through these two examples and through the way how we plot that, and you can kind of see and have a good understanding of what the correlation coefficient means to the plotting or to the data sets, right? So once again, in the remaining grading space right here, I'm gonna finish up with my example number 3. So I want you to once again turn over to example number 3, the page that has example number 3, and then we have found earlier that my R, the correlation coefficient for example 3, is a negative 0.95. Okay? So this time let's try to plot on the point here to see what's happening. Now, for my first point, when x is 1, my y value is 10. So 3, 6, 9, and 10 is right there. My first point, pretty high up there, right? And then my second point is 3 and it's 9 for y. 3 for x, 9 for y is my second point. So that's what I get right there. Okay. Now, for my next one over the fourth data value, the third data value, my x value here is 4, but my y value here is 6. So it's jumping down right here. That's my third point. Okay? And then my fifth data point, which is having x being 5 and also y being 5. So this is my fourth point. My fifth point here is going to be having x being 6 and y being 4. So and my sixth point, which is going to have 8 for x, 2, 4, 6, 8 for x, and 2 for y. So it's this point right here. Right? And then my last point, which is 10 for x and 2 for y, I have that point right there. Okay? So now this time, let's look at the bandwidth right here. The band here, it's all going down, right? It's pointing down, and you can see that this is a negative relationship. It's a negative relationship. You can see that as x going further to the right, your y value is dropping. Okay, so this is a negative relationship. Or you can think of that as it's going down to the right, It's going down to the right. So that makes it consistent. This is what we expected earlier, didn't we? I gave these expectations when we were computing these R values, right? So once again, you can see how it's consistent with the R value here. And also you can see that the way it's dropping here, it's dropping even more rapidly, even more quickly compared to the way how it rises in the earlier graph. And it's all because this time my R here is even closer, much closer to really close to -1. So that's why it's explaining the fact that the points here are dropping really rapidly. Okay?